Now let's have a look at the purchasing module in VIENNA Advantage. Now first of all, for that let's see and define a vendor. We have a vendor master in the system. Now vendors are, our customers are saved in a single table, basically called business partner table. However, you can segregate those in different windows, whether a customer window or a supplier window. And one vendor can also be at the same time a customer, so that is basically possible in VIENNA Advantage. Now this is the vendor window. Basically here we have a list of vendors where we see some overview information about them in a grid, and then we can see and switch into the detailed mode. We have various fields which are relevant here. Of course, greeting, you can define a search key. This is basically a kind of ID which could be numeric, alphanumeric, or alphabetical. And then we have various other settings, for example, related to credit check. Now on the vendor side, of course, it might be relevant or not. In some cases it is, whether there is a credit check for vendors as well. Then you will have a group. What is the group for the vendor? This open balance is something which is automatically calculated over here and displayed over here basically. Then we have different other terms and conditions, I would say. One of those is of course the payment rule. This is a kind of payment method which is the usual payment method defined with the supplier. Then you can define purchase price list in whatever currency it is used by the supplier. You can have a price list maintained in that currency. You might have certain other discount schemas for your purchases which you can link with your supplier, so that's something you can do. And also, what are your payment terms? Now of course you can define as many payment terms as you like, and simply just zoom from here to the terms and conditions. You can use of course those which are existing, but of course define any number of these payment terms by yourself, or even other terms and conditions which are there. So quite interesting. Even let's have a look at one of these things like payment term. Now in this case it says 50% immediate and 50% in 30 days, which means you can define basically two schedules or two terms and do certain settings related to the payment terms. For example, is it a fixed due date of a certain, like in a month, or is it a after delivery, is it an advance payment term, or does it include advance? What are the net days for payment? What are the discount days? What are the discount days for the second level of discount? How many grace days would you like to allow? And now in this case it's a schedule, so there will be two lines over here, 50% immediate and 50% after 30 days. So these kind of constellations are very easy to set up in VIENNA Advantage and are quite powerful. Now based on the payment terms, the payment schedules will be automatically generated based on the invoice, which means you can project your cash flow based on the payment schedule. Apart from that, you can also define a return policy with the supplier. So in this case, goods return in 10 days, for example, you can define, and there are also certain other terms. For the VAT and taxation, you can define various settings, so related to selection of the VAT automatically at the purchase order, and then also if someone is responsible from our side as a representative, so I mean it could be a sales representative on the one side, but also a representative which is dealing with that purchase representative dealing with the supplier. Yeah, and then of course you are free to add a number of fields which you like. Of course there are some default fields, but you can always add and remove fields. We can also have multiple locations which we can link to the supplier. So in this case there is one location which is at the same time ship to location, pay from location, remit to, and invoice to. But of course at the same time you can have multiple locations linked with the supplier, where you can segregate what is the pay to location and so on. And you can define one or multiple contact persons and define also their positions and yeah, phone number and all the details which is required. Important of course here also is the link to accounting. So if you're using accounting, these defaults will be used in order to post the entries and also the supplier's bank account details. So these are basically some of the standard fields and tabs, but as you know, in VIENNA Advantage you can add any number of these fields and tabs from your site. We can also do correspondence with the supplier directly from the left side here if you want to fix an appointment, have a task ready related to the vendor, and all that is kept in the history. So even if you send an email or issue a letter or something, all that is of course saved in the history of the supplier. Now let's see what are the transactions related to the supplier and purchase. Now before we do that, just look at the price list also. We saw that you can link a price list to the supplier, and also there's an option to create multiple versions of the price list. So as you go on, the prices might change and you might need to maintain these prices in different versions. And here there is an option to do that as well, and each version may contain prices, and we can generate, for example, from one version we can generate the next version based on certain discount schema. Discount schema basically is a calculation logic. For example, if you have a price increase, a decrease on certain items, etc., where you can define, okay, I have a price increase of 10% on a certain product category. So you would select the product category and then mention, for example, a surcharge amount or a surcharge percentage. So in order to drive to yourself to the next version of the price list. So it's quite handy, and the validity date as well. So handling multiple price lists from the supplier side, and if required, of course, you can import this data from your supplier using EDI or other interfaces. Yeah, then of course on the purchasing side we have the RFQ process, where you can roll out an RFQ based on topics. You might have a fixed list of suppliers which are subscribers to this topic. So for example, if I would like to purchase electronics, so I might have a certain number of subscribers to that, which are different vendors. I could list those vendors over here. And based on that and the RFQ lines that you are defining, the suppliers can be automatically intimated by email. And you can define for the RFQs whether the supplier should quote all lines or selected lines only, so they can select those, or quote totals only. And so there are various settings that you can do, response date, etc. So typically for contracting work, etc., that makes pretty good sense to use the RFQ. And the system is also able to basically rank the responses and then generate purchase orders from here. And the cool thing here is it can generate multiple purchase orders. So for example, if for product A the winner is supplier A, and for product B the winner is a different supplier, so after the ranking the system will tell, okay, this is the winner in this category and this is the winner in that category. If you of course say that you allow a split, then based on that the system can generate multiple purchase orders respectively to the suppliers. Apart from that, of course, the whole RFQ, we also have, of course, the requisitions. So based on which the internal departments can put forward a requisition. This could be a movement requisition for material movement, or it could be a purchase requisition. So an employee, a department can raise a requisition, and based on that and select certain lines. There is a reference, of course, from the line. So if something is going to be ordered, you can always track what are the purchase orders which are linked to that. So in case a requisition results in a purchase order, so you always have the reference to that, and you can always track what is the delivered quantity and also the link to the order line in that case, of course, as well. So and from the requisitions you can also generate purchase orders. So generate purchase order from requisition directly. What also is possible is to generate a sales order from purchase order. So generate purchase order from a sales order. So in case you are trading on items and you sold an item to a customer, and that is an item which is either a drop shipped item, which is also possible, so you can mark items as drop shipment items, or of course you can back to back place an order to your supplier based on those items. And so that's also possible inside the system. Then of course the whole replenishment is possible, which is moreover a topic for the material management. Let's look at the purchase order. So we can create purchase orders. Also manually you can create purchase orders, of course. So if you're not generating through the replenishment or from the sales order or from the requisition, you can also go here and generate manually your purchase orders. and you can also take a printout in different formats, like in this case I'm selecting a PDF. And yeah, so there is a standard format for the purchase order, of course, but you can always, yeah, there is a report writer inside the system which allows you to define your own formats and yeah, use those as well. Of course, some details on the purchase order. First of all, you can have a document type where you could have, for example, a normal purchase order, a release purchase order. A release purchase order is, for example, if you have a blanket order and you're using having a long-term contract with your supplier and you would like to release a certain quantity inside the purchase order from the blanket order. So in that case, you can use that. Yeah, the vendor's name, the invoice to vendor, location, bill, location, and user contact, the invoice contact, and other items. As you can see, there is a drop shipment checkbox which is automatically checked on if there is a drop shipment generation from the sales order, for example. Yeah, warehouse, which is ordering, what are the payment terms, etc., the price list, all that is automatically picked generally, and then of course in the lines you can record any number of lines. Now in this case there is only one line. Interesting here to see is, of course, you can always track how much is ordered, how much already received, reserved, invoiced, returned. So that's of course the quick reference to track these things. And the order text is automatically also calculated. If there is a reference to requisition lines, in this case there is actually, you will always see that, okay, this is connected to a certain requisition number. So here in this case, you know, 3 different requisitions have been consolidated in order to create here this purchase order. And matching, of course, to invoice shipments or receipts. Now, so far we haven't received anything, or we haven't also received any invoice, so you don't see any data here, but in case there is, so you would also see the linkage to that. And of course, in case you need to make an advance payment based on the purchase order, then also the system will generate a payment schedule, which can be then of course taken care of by the accounting department to make the payment for that. Yeah, so that's the purchase order window, and you see, of course, a lot of cases can be addressed in that. And once you release the purchase order, you can go there and click on complete. What would happen in this case is that the workflow will be triggered. Now, the workflow can be multiple levels. As you know, VIENNA Advantage has a workflow management system inside, which means you can define all sorts of approval processes, approval steps, and go through cost center heads, purchasing heads, accounting heads, etc., etc. And also the system would check if you set up a budget for purchasing based on ledgers or products. So then you can also, the system would also check whether there is a budget available for that or not, and then alert the user that, okay, the budget is finished, so you can't do that, or you can do it with warnings, etc. So a lot of possibilities are there also to define your own business process in the purchasing. Now, apart from that, of course, you have various reports, which are, of course, on the one side inside here the system directly for the from the menu, which you could open those. Also, we have plenty of purchasing reports which are inside the BI system as well. Let's have a look at the blanket purchase order as well, so which is also standard functionality. So here you can define blanket purchase orders. Looks pretty much similar to what we have on the purchase order. And however, here you have the possibility to define blanket orders and also different delivery dates, like order valid from to, so a contractual term which you could define here, and then when you would like to have delivered certain items, you could define in the lines. Yeah, then let's look at the material receipt. So after purchase order, we can also have a receipt of materials. So material receipt can be different types. One is a receipt, a simple receipt, or a receipt with confirmation, which is basically linked with a quality check. VIENNA Advantage also has a quality check module, so based on items you can define what is the percentage that you would like to take through the quality control. And yeah, so basically, or even let's say to go through and give a confirmation on those items. And once you receive items, you can receive items based on like selecting a supplier, so and then copy lines from purchase order existing. So let me just select first the supplier. So hopefully I have, let me select now this one. Not sure whether there is a purchase order existing, of course, for this one. Now I can select German office, that I'm receiving material in the German office, office warehouse 1, and I can create lines from, and I can see whether there is any purchase order existing. Now there is no purchase order existing for this business partner, but I could try to select another one, or I go to the purchase order window and see. Alright, so let me see, this is a non-approved, unapproved, so but we have, for example, one over here from Rocks and Wires. This could be one I could use, or in the German organization I could use the Chatter Wires as a supplier. Okay, so let's select Chatter Wires, and you see immediately the location and the details will come up, and I can go to create lines from, and I see, yeah, there is an order. I can select where, what is my receiving locator, and select a locator, or even I could create a new locator on the fly. And here, interesting, I have a quantity which is ordered, and I have a quantity which is received, so I could modify that I am doing a partial receipt, or remove some lines of this, not receiving anything, and based on that basically say OK. And that would basically copy the receiving lines into my lines, and you see that the order lines are matched by this. In case we have any serial numbers, etc., we could also enter the serial numbers, and then simply complete the document. The matching will happen automatically since I have given a reference to the purchase order, so the matching will happen automatically by this. Yeah, so that's the material receipt. After receiving material, of course, the material goes into the stock, and I can generate from here, I can generate the supplier invoice automatically. Now that's interesting because you would like to make sure that the quantity received matches with the quantity invoice. So in that case, it's quite handy, because if you do not do that, then you would enter it manually, whereas there can be a discrepancy. So here it will of course be visible what is written on the invoice, what is generated by the system. So if there is a discrepancy, so you would immediately know that something is over invoiced, maybe in that case. So that's the material receipt, of course, and then we can handle, of course, the complete side of the vendor returns, whereas vendor return material authorization can be created, and also returns against that can be handled. The system is able to generate also the credit notes, etc., as well as invoices of the supplier. So let's have a look at that. And in this whole thing related to the invoices, so let me open one existing. So in this case, we are on the one side, of course, put the complete reference to the order, and the lines have a reference also to the receipt lines. And interesting also, we can enter landed cost, and the system can automatically generate the costing. So system supports various types of costing methods at the same time, and like weighted average invoice, FIFO, etc. So all that is automatically generated based on various different transactions inside the system. And so you would have always a track of what is the current cost of the items. Now this has a linkage, of course, also to the accounting module, and it gets posted in terms of the transactions. And again, this can also be sent through the workflow if there's any kind of approval process, or if there's any discrepancy, any dispute, etc., registered, can be tracked as well. Let's look at the reports now. So we have two types of reports. Of course, we have reports which are available inside the menu, which you can access in each of the category, like purchase order related reports, where we have like purchase order by supplier, supplier prices report, general reports, so a lot of detailed and register reports that we have over here under each category. And then additionally, of course, we have BI reports, where we have also purchase reports inside the BI, where you can do detailed analysis, or also track different purchase behaviors, etc. So for example, in this case, I have comparison of different vendors, how much I have purchased from the one or the other, and also we are handling different currencies. So all in all, we have basically various reports which are related to purchase, where within a single report you have various possibilities to go through. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of the purchasing module.